In this lesson, we are going to focus on algebraic properties. Let's start by talking about what a property is. Properties are like the laws of math. They're basically rules that are true for all numbers, no matter what. There are many different types of properties, but today we're going to focus on 4. Those are the identity properties, the commutative property, the associative property, and the distributive property. You probably actually already know the identity properties. These are true for addition and multiplication. The identity property of addition says that when you add 0 to any value, the sum will always equal that value. So, a plus 0 equals a. And we could substitute or plug in any value for a. 4 plus 0 equals 4. 5,000 plus 0 equals 5,000. 1/2 plus 0 equals 1/2. The identity property of multiplication says that when you multiply any value by 1, the product will always equal that value. So, a times 1 equals a. And we could, again, substitute any value in for a, and it would still be true. 8 times 1 is 8. 9,670 times 1 is 9,670, and so on. So here's an example of a property that you've already worked with and that you already know. Now, for the rest of the lesson, we're going to talk about the commutative, associative, and distributive property. Let's start by looking at the commutative property. You do not need to write this down in your notes. We're going to create a table later that has all 3 properties. So right now, just sit back and watch the video. The definition of the commutative property says that when adding or multiplying numbers, changing the order does not change the result. So for addition, this would look like a plus b is equal to b plus a. Or if I wanted to substitute or plug in values for those variables, it could also mean that 4 plus 6 equals 6 plus 4. It doesn't matter which way I add these numbers or the order, I'm still going to get the same result. This also is true for multiplication. So a times b equals b times a. Remember, whenever you have a variable squished up next to another variable or a constant, that means that we're secretly multiplying. So this means that we have a times b, and this is b times a. If we want to plug in those same values, this means that 4 times 6 equals 6 times 4. Basically, if you're adding or multiplying numbers, the commutative property says the order doesn't matter. You can move those numbers around and you're still going to get the same result. Now remember, this only works for addition and multiplication. It does not work for subtraction or division. The associative property says that when adding and subtracting again, rearranging parentheses will not change the result. And remember, parentheses just make it so we group certain parts of an equation together, so those parts of the equation are done first, according to the order of operations. So for addition, this would look something like a plus b plus c is also equal to b plus c plus a. So I can move these parentheses, these curved lines around. Because this is all addition, it doesn't matter how I group those numbers. So let's put in some values so we can see how this works. On the left side of the equation, I would start by doing 1 plus 2 because that's in the parentheses. I know 1 plus 2 is 3. Plus 3 again would equal 6. Now on this side of the equation, I'm going to start by adding 2 plus 3 because that's in the parentheses. 2 plus 3 equals 5, plus 1 equals 6 again. So even though I grouped the numbers differently and I added them in a different order, I still got the same value. This also works for multiplication. So with variables, it could look something like a times b times c is also equal to starting with b times c and then multiplying by a. if we look at this example with numbers, 1 times 2 is 2. Then if I multiply by 3, I get 6. Over here, 2 times 3 is 6. Then if I multiply by 1, I still get 6. So basically, if you're adding or multiplying numbers, the associative property says you can group numbers differently and still get the same result. It doesn't matter which numbers the parentheses are around, you'll still end up getting back to the same result if it's all addition or all multiplication. All right, let's look at our final property, which is the distributive property. This property states that multiplying a number by a group of numbers added together is the same as doing each multiplication separately. Sounds a little confusing, but once you see an example, it makes more sense. So if I have A times the sum of B plus C, I could get the same result by distributing that A that's being multiplied to both the B and the C. So that means I would do A times B and A times C and then add them together. So it would look something like this. Let's look at another example to prove this. Let's say I have 2 times the sum of 3 plus 4. I'll get the same result if I distribute the 2 and start with the multiplication and do 2 times 3, then add 2 times 4. Let's see this in action. So on the left side, I'm going to start by adding these values together. 3 plus 4 would give me 7. So then I'd multiply by 2 and get 14. Once I use the distributive property and now have a number sentence that looks like this, I'm still going to get the same result. I know that 2 times 3 is 6 and 2 times 4 is 8. So that would become 6 plus 8. And when I add those together, I still get 14. So the distributive property basically says if you're multiplying a number by a parentheses and numbers within a parentheses, you can multiply the outside value by everything inside and still get the same result. All right, now it's time for you to put this in your notes. Go ahead and write algebraic properties at the top of your page and then draw a table that has 3 columns. You can pause the video if you need more time. We're going to start by filling in the column furthest to the left. And in this column, we're going to write about the commutative property. So I want you to write down these examples. Remember, the commutative property only works for addition and multiplication. So we only have addition and multiplication sentences. Make sure you have this copied in your notes before you move on. You can pause the video now if you need more time. All right, let's look at how we can actually use the commutative property. So you are about to be asked in Edpuzzle to answer these 2 questions. The first one, according to the commutative property, what is 7 plus 4 also equal to? And we're given a list of different options. You need to tell me if it's equal to 10 plus 1, 11, or 4 plus 7. For 2, you are going to answer this question. According to the commutative property, again, what is y times w also equal to? YW, w times y, or m times w? Go ahead and answer these questions now. All right, let's go ahead and just go over this. So the commutative property says that when we're adding or multiplying numbers, the order doesn't matter. And so all of these options for the number 1 are actually true. 7 plus 4 is equal to 10 plus 1. It is equal to 11. But only this final option represents the commutative property. So you should have chosen C, or 4 plus 7 for this one. Down here, if we have y times w, remember, commutative property says order doesn't matter, so we can switch those around. So the correct answer would actually be w times y. And it doesn't matter what values we put in for y and w in these, they would still be equal. All right, now it's time for us to fill in the next column in our notes. In this next column, you're going to write about the associative property. Again, you're going to have some examples. Remember, this property only works for addition and multiplication. Go ahead and pause the video now if you need more time to get this into your notes. All right, let's see how we can actually use the associative property by practicing. The first question you need to answer is, according to the associative property, what is 7 times 4 times 6 also equal to? You need to select from those 3 options. Number 2 is very similar. According to the associative property, what is 14 plus the sum of a plus 18 also equal to? Remember, you're looking for the answer that shows the associative property. The examples are over here, so you can use those as a reference. Go ahead and answer these 2 questions now. All right, let's just quickly go over. The associative property is all about regrouping and grouping numbers with parentheses. So it says that it doesn't matter how we group the numbers, we'll still get the same result. So we're looking for number sentences where the terms are still in the same order, but they're grouped differently. So for this first one, the correct answer would be A. I haven't changed the order of my numbers. I still have 7 times 4 times 6, but I've now regrouped, and I have 7 times 4 in the parentheses instead of 4 times 6. For the second one, same thing. I want to look for the one that has the same order. Only C works for that, but I'm basically regrouping, and instead of adding A plus 18 first, I would add 14 plus A first and still get the same result. All right, time to fill in that final column with the distributive property. Go ahead and take a minute to copy down this example. Don't forget to draw in your arrows. Those are a great visual for understanding the distributive property. You can pause the video now if you need more time. All right, let's actually practice using the distributive property. So these 2 questions are going to look just like the other ones, but now with the distributive. Number 1 says, according to the distributive property, what is 5 times the sum of 9 and plus 3 also equal to? Remember, we're looking for the one that shows the distributive property. Number 2, according to the distributive property, what is y times the sum of 5 plus w also equal to? Go ahead and answer these 2 questions. All right, let's check your work. So for the first one, all of these answers are actually equal to this equation, but only one shows the distributive property, and that would be B. Remember, we would distribute the 5 to both of the values within the parentheses. So this expression is also equal to 5 times 9 plus 5 times 3. For the second one, I would distribute the y to everything in the parentheses. So I should have selected C, because that shows that I'm to have y times 5 is equal to y times w. All right, that is the end of our Edpuzzle video. You now need to move on to your problem set that is located on Google Classroom.